Committee. Johnson. Joe, you there? I see a wave.
I'm here.
There he is. There he is. Mr. Nix, Hugh Nix is absent. Cindy Miles
Here.
and Rob Hartman, he's absent. And John McKay is absent. So we have 3 present and Mr. Dool is missing, so 4 absent. So we will go ahead and have the meeting, but we will not be able to vote on anything of any substance unless somebody shows up. So that means that we will bypass the approval of the meeting minutes for April the 13th and May 11th. And we will go to the uniform zoning code Old Town update regarding tattoo businesses. Scott, you got the floor.
All right, thank you, sir. Ty Ben, if we can go ahead and bring up PowerPoint for the Old Town zoning code, that would be great. So this is an item that you all have seen before, and so this is an opportunity to check in with you and also to give you an update on a different proposal in terms of how we might move forward in the future. Okay, very good. Thank you, Ty Ben. Okay, so in terms of what was going to be the recommended action, it would be for you all to determine whether or not this should move on to the full MAPC, whether it's ready for that, and then to take that motion. In this case, since there's not a quorum, you can simply indicate whether or not you've got any hesitation or concerns with this, and then we can factor that, staff can factor that into our decision about whether or not to take that forward. So you don't, in this case, you don't have to take formal action on it. Next slide. Okay, so just to refresh everyone's memory and to get everyone on the same page. So in terms of existing conditions, there is a Delano overlay, which I'm sure you're well acquainted with. In that overlay, it prohibits tattoo and body piercing businesses, which is a specific defined use in the zoning code. It prohibits those uses in those properties that are covered by that Delano overlay. There is a business that opened up that does do tattoos. It's located at the former First Gear building in Old Town. And there was a complaint received because we do enforcement based on complaints. We received a complaint on it. And so we've been taking it through the enforcement process. Next slide. Okay, so here's a map of the Old Town overlay. You can see that it's the properties that are outlined in red. The property that's outlined in kind of the turquoise blue-green color is the property where the tattoo operation is currently in place.
It's hard to see on it. Can you put your mouse on that, Scott? Just to show it. I think I see it, but.
Oh, yeah, certainly. It's down here, right where it says Rock Island. So
Thank you.
Just off of Douglas where the big parking lot is. You might be familiar maybe with the Larkspur or Emerson Biggins. It's at the north end of that parking lot between them. Next slide, please. So as I indicated earlier, the zoning code does prohibit tattooing and body piercing facilities in the Old Town Overlay District. And this is where you can find that in the zoning code. Next slide, please. In terms of the series of events, so Old Town Overlay was created in 1991. It was in late 2022 that we received a complaint about the business, the tattoo business. We have gone to the Old Town Association, got some feedback from them, brought forward a recommendation to advance plans back in March. That recommendation did not appear to be a good fit and was voted for denial instead of moving it forward to the MAPC. So what we've done is we've met with the Old Town Association again. That was in April. And next slide, please. And so what we're doing today is we're bringing forward what our recommendation is for this time. And so what we're proposing based on feedback from the Old Town Association is to update the overlay district to allow for tattoo and body piercing uses in Old Town, something that's currently prohibited, but if this proposal moves forward and is approved, would be allowed. Now, there are some conditions that would apply to this, though. And again, this is in response to feedback that we received. And so the tattoo and body piercing uses could only operate by appointment. So they would have to be by appointment only. They would not be able to be open before 10 a.m., nor would they be able to be open after 10 p.m. So they would have specific operating hours. Now they could be operated open less than that, but that is the maximum that they could be open. Next slide. And in terms of process, so any zoning code change, if it's initiated, there's a number of different ways that it can be initiated. We would take this information to the full MAPC with the specific language. We would ask the MAPC to initiate it. That would occur at an MAPC meeting. If it was approved, then we would work on distributing the required public notice to the properties within the overlay district. Then there would be the MAPC public hearing after the public notice. It would go to the district advisory board and would have to be approved by the city council, and likely also would have to go to county commission, but probably on the consent agenda for the zoning code update to be approved there. Next slide. So again, this was an opportunity to check in with you all on this new proposal for how to move forward. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Scott, Joe, or Cindy?
Scott, I guess number one, I guess I don't understand the appointment process, because quite frankly, that would be really hard for anybody to track. I mean, I could walk in the door and say, I want an appointment, and they could say, okay, we'll give you an appointment in 5 minutes. So yeah. I don't really see the purpose of that. But I also just don't understand overall why tattoo shops and piercing places were excluded to begin with.
My understanding is that going back to the 1990s, it was maybe a different context in time. And I think that tattooing had a different kind of association in terms of kind of the type of business that it was. If you remember, I think there was even, there were limitations, I think even in Oklahoma, on where you could get tattoos. And so I think Arc City had quite a few parlors because of that. So I just think it was a different environment. The other thing too, is I think they were trying to revitalize Old Town. So I think they were trying to set a certain bar, a certain standard. I think things have changed over time. At least that's my read from the public input we've received. In terms of the appointment process, you're right. Someone could come in and say, hey, yeah, we'll give you an appointment in 5 minutes. I think what this is intended to prevent lines from forming or people congregating outside the business. When we talked with the Old Town Association, that was one of the things that we heard is they were cautious about having an environment where people were lining up and hanging out outside of these operations while there's also bars and other things going on. And so they just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to cause a disruption or any kind of incident that was going to happen.
Well, in that case, I mean, I think this is something that needs to be addressed, and that we should go ahead and move it forward to the full MAPC to see about changing this, because it just doesn't make sense much to me that we should be continuing to exclude the tattoo shops.
But I appreciate the feedback and the opportunity to check in. I just want to emphasize, like I've said before, is that in terms of this process, we'll take it to the full MAPC for consideration, and then there would be a whole nother public notice that would go out for the before the public hearing.
Bill, you got any questions or comments, thoughts about moving this thing forward?
Yes, I do, but I'm not going to express them.
Okay.
I mean, I'm
Okay.
kind of old fashioned, I guess. I just don't think Old Town is, I just don't think it's strong enough right now. I mean, it's gone its cycle, in my opinion, for someone who used to go there a lot. I think it's fragile. And I could be totally wrong because I don't go there anymore.
Okay.
I think you're right, but I think a lot of that really has to do with the crime and the shootings, not the shooting the earring through the ear.
Yeah, you can be right. I mean, I guess I have an aversion to tattoos and I don't want that to come out.
I'll put my 2 cents in. I'm willing to see it go forward. I think that there is a vast change in terms of how we look at tattoos, where
I agree.
before motorcycle gangs and things like that. Now it's social clubs and church groups, and it's no telling where you're going to find your folks that want to have tattoos, and so it's a different game than it was 20 years ago.
I think all of my family that served in military has military tattoos.
But that was a long time ago, right? I mean, that was before the rush in 90s.
Okay, since we can't take a vote on it, have you got enough input, Scott, for?
I do. I think there was an individual who wanted to provide public comment. I don't know if you wanted
Okay.
to accept that.
We can do that. We'll open the floor for public comment. If anybody wants to speak, just go to the podium, please. State your name and address for the record, and
this is not what I was here to listen to anyway, but Jack Patton, 337 South Rutan, 67218. I guess I got a couple of questions. Is this business operating already? Despite us having an overlay prior to? So projecting that onto other issues that I'm concerned about is, how did that happen? And which leads me to other topics we're going to talk about. We'll get back to enforcement. Why have it if we're not going to have it? This wouldn't be a question if the job had been done whenever they said, and somebody said, oh yeah, sure, go. And so that's kind of the things I've been told many times from the people I talk to. This is not always upset at what the city does. It's just after something happens, people really get ticked at what they don't do. And so now we have a protective overlay, we had rules, and somebody just, flipped them off and did it anyway. And now here we are. So that's it.
I'll give Scott a chance to address that. But part of it is the process that we go through is enforcement based. When somebody complains about something that's wrong, that starts the wheels rolling, and bureaucracy is not a fast moving machine. So we're at the process of how to deal with somebody that has broken the rules is where we're at right now to rectify that. And there are many options that can do that. But Scott, go if you could.
Sure. No, I'm happy to. And so the question was is it already operating? Is the tattoo business already in operation? And yes, the answer is yes, it is. And in fact, it was we received a citizen complaint, which started our enforcement actions on it. This one has been a little bit unique in that when we started enforcement actions, which means we send them a letter to notify them that, hey, we've observed that you're in violation. We've received a complaint. You're in violation of the zoning code. You have 30 days to correct the situation. Following that, there was quite a bit of discourse with the Old Town Association, and they indicated that they were amenable to the business continuing to operate, and in fact wanted to look at ways to make that possible, which would require a zoning change. So we have suspended enforcement for this individual location while we're resolving whether or not there should be changes to the zoning code and what those changes should be. So that's why this one's a little bit unique in this situation, because of the feedback we've received about this from the public.
Appreciate that clarification. So
Sure.
anybody else want to speak? Okay. State your name and address for the record, please. We give you 3 minutes, and it looks like a light meeting, so if you need more, we can. That.
Lonnie Barnes, 2924 North Terrace Drive here in Wichita, Kansas. So it's similar to what he's asking, because we've been told in here in most of our neighborhood association meetings that if you're afraid of something, you're trying to leery of something, then you develop an overlay to kind of give our recommendations. And I'm assuming they're just recommendations as to what we want and don't want in here. And so I'm just curious in here if they're sound like they're only recommendations, because if someone decides they're going to do it, then has to be a complaint. And so that really makes me curious as we go forward, even on short-term rentals in here. If someone, they say, well, there can't be any in here, somebody puts one there, it has to be a complaint before we go out and enforce it. So I guess I'm trying to see if there's teeth or validity to an overlay, and because a lot of effort goes into putting them together. I would think they would have to come before the board to get their permitting and everything and request a change, even before the association or something, before it gets to this board. Just need a little bit of clarity.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Scott, you got any comments?
Yeah, I think maybe just a clarification on the enforcement process. So the enforcement process, this typical process is that we would notify the property owner that there's been a violation at their property. We give them a certain amount of time in order to rectify that, typically 30 days. And if that is not accomplished, then we will take the matter to court. And it will be up to the judge to assign what the remedy is, whether that's a penalty that's imposed on a daily basis, or whether it's an order that they need to do a specific action. So that's the typical process for zoning enforcement. And I would highlight that we have another PowerPoint, another agenda item, which will cover this also for a different situation later on this morning.
Not seeing anybody else here that can speak. Is there anybody online virtually that would like to speak on this issue? Hearing now, that will move on to the next item. If you've got all you need on this, Scott.
I do.
Go to the
Thank you.
next
That's
item,
been
which
very helpful.
is citizens complaining issues along Cleveland Avenue.
Yes, this one's a little bit unique. I'm bringing this to you really as a heads up. I think that it shows some zoning actions that were had taken place decades ago, and kind of what the more immediate consequences have been or results of that. And so I just want to bring it to your attention because it's been brought to my attention, and also maybe strategize with you about what might be done in the future. So here we go. Next slide. So again, on this one, we're not recommending any specific action. It's just a matter of just want to bring this to your attention and kind of collaborate with you for what we might do in the future. Next slide. So we have received citizen complaint about noise, dirt, dust, removal of trees and grass. And next slide. What's happening is a block along Cleveland Avenue. If you travel down Central and then you turn north on Cleveland, just a little bit outside of downtown, you're going to come across this rather large industrial building which will be located on the west side of the street. This is in around the 700 block on this map. If you look to the east, what you will see is a number of homes, a church. There's appears to be a commercial building, and I'll show you photos of this. But what has recently started to happen is that it appears that the industrial use to the west has purchased properties on the east side of Cleveland and is now storing machinery and parts on those properties. And so we are receiving complaints from the adjoining homeowner who's there, indicating, you know, that the dust, debris, they've cut down trees, all of this. Now, what I would point out is that the properties in pink, so the blue kind of gray color on the west side of Cleveland is industrial. The pink color on the east side is general commercial. Outdoor storage is allowed on general commercial. We'll talk a little bit about kind of how this plays out. So next slide, please. I've got a series of photos for you when we get there. Okay, so here's the area in that this has come up about. Next slide. So this is the property, the industrial property to the west. Next slide. And next slide. This is the house on the east side of Cleveland, one of the houses, and it's at the, it abuts where the storage is taking place. It's obviously just south of where the storage is. Next slide. And these are photos from this morning.
What is that? What are they storing there, Scott? Just out of curiosity.
It appears to be some metal piece of machinery or like shelving or something. It's flat metal, large metal things.
Okay.
And this is a trash container. Next slide. This is the former railroad, which was abandoned up until I-135 up at Hydraulic. Next slide. There's some what appear to be like cars that would go on like a railroad track. Almost appears to be like some like oil rig or some kind of rig machinery. Next slide. This is the house to the north, which abuts this. I think you kind of get the picture and that there's just a lot of storage that's taking place. Next slide. Next slide. We'll just keep going through these. This is looking north, so you can see the house and the church and the like church office building that's on this side of the block. Next slide. This is looking south at what we had seen before. Next slide. And this is at the rear, so there's an alleyway. And so this is looking at the collection of machinery from the other side, from the east. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so part of the interesting part about this situation is that the properties are zoned general commercial all along that strip along the east side of the street. Outdoor storage is permitted in general commercial. So then the question for me became, well, what about screening? Next slide. Well, and screening is covered under this article of this Unified Zoning Code. And it says here, I know you can't read it because it's so small, but it says screening shall be provided on all properties developed for all uses except single family and duplex. So screening is required except when such uses are established on property within, abutting, across the street, or an alley from residential zoned districts, except when separated by a major barrier. So in this case, the homes that are already there are zoned GC. They do not require screening from this property because it's allowed by right and because the homes are zoned GC. So I think what we're observing here is property that has been zoned for a much more intensive use than how it was actually in use. It's been in use for single family homes, and this has been for decades. But we are just now seeing this property transition into the outdoor storage use, which is very intensive right next to the single family homes. Next slide. I also looked into, there's also a separate section on screening of mechanical equipment and outdoor storage areas. And this requires that screening shall be provided on all non-residential development sufficient to reasonably hide from the ground level view all loading docks, trash, outdoor storage is included in that. Similar uses from any residential zoning district or public right-of-way located within 150 feet. So the property owner here with the industrial uses is in violation of this portion of the zoning code in that they must screen, they're required to screen from the street, but not the adjoining houses because of the zoning. Now they will be required to screen from the properties across the alley because those are B multifamily zoning as well. Next slide. But this isn't a case in an incident, a case in point. I think the larger conversation is that we have a variety of areas in older parts of town, specifically around downtown, where the zoning is pretty intensive, GC or industrial, and there are properties that have been in use for single family for quite some time. And I'm not saying that we need to step in and rezone all of this, but what I'm suggesting is that it may be worth our time as a planning department to take a closer look at these properties and identify if there are pockets of residential uses that perhaps should be zoned residentially instead of industrial or GC. But that's a much larger project. I just want to at least make you aware of this instance and make you aware that there's possibility for this to occur in other places of the city as well. So in terms of what's happening with a specific case, the same industrial user was storing materials on the B multifamily property that they own across the alley further to the east. They were cited due to complaints. They have gone to court. I don't know what the results of that were, but they have gone through the enforcement process, and I assume that there's probably an order for them to clear that up from the courts. So that's what I have. It's informational, and any thoughts or feedback you've got on it would be great. But as you think about it too later on, let me know.
Thanks, Scott. Any questions or ideas that you can give Scott going forward? Scott, look at the pictures there. Looked to me like there were some areas that had a lot of high grass and weeds and things like that. Were there any violations or there rules regarding that? I mean, you got a vacant lot, and a vacant lot is not a bad thing if it's cleaned up with trash and maintained. What I heard from your presentation is that the violation needs screening on the front and on the back, but not necessarily on the side. Is that a correct assessment?
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. So I think, the one action that the property owners could take is they could come in and get their property rezoned. But I don't know if that would require them to install the screening because the zoning action will have taken place after this outdoor storage was already there. So that's just something I just don't have the answer to yet. But yeah, in terms of the weeds, that would be an MABCD issue. So we wouldn't have a record on that, but I can ask our inspector to see if they know.
Cindy?
So I just want to say, I mean, I think this is really disappointing that we've got homeowners out there that can't enjoy their property as they should be able to enjoy their property due to the lack of screening or even the inappropriate, in my opinion, storage, although I know it's appropriate under zoning. Sure, I guess they could have their property rezoned, as you said, but if that's going to put the requirement back on them to provide the screening, then that's not really a resolution for the issues. I would be curious, if you could come up with other ideas in the future as to how we address issues like this, because I'm sure there are a number of areas that are like this.
interesting when parts of our community transition, you know, over literally hundreds of, we're getting into the hundreds of years category now. Some of those properties look like they've been around for a long, long time. And it changes from what at one point years ago was residential, now becoming industrial. That's a hard transition to make without just tearing those houses down. The spooky part for me is if we open up this to review, it looks to me like it's a huge can of worms that's going to take a lot of time. Is there some reasonable hope of coming up with some recommendations that would somehow get us out of the mess?
I think so. That's my hope anyway. I hope if we look at it at a block by block basis, I think if we can find those areas that look like they're viable collections of single family homes, that would be an opportunity to do select rezonings of pockets. Because the area to the south, this is all central business district, and this was rezoned, I think, within the last 10, 15 years. But it's these pockets of industrial and general commercial that, especially down here, down south, that I think are the opportunities. But I know a lot of those areas are already developed with, you know, warehouses or businesses. So I am not saying carte blanche. I'm saying we would have to do a real detailed look to see if there are areas that maybe it makes sense to be residential zoning.
I'll open up the floor. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this issue? And state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Lonnie Barnes at 2924 North Terrace Drive, Wichita, Kansas. He's right. As this thing transitions and property comes industrial and even multi-units come up available. You know, I've been in here and the MAPC is okay in PUDs for developers to come in and develop in here. I got the same issues. I got Farha put a parking lot right next to my property. You guys said was a great idea. They're 2 feet from my fence. The weeds are growing up between my fence and the parking lot. It was supposed to have been a privacy fence put up in here. This was back in December when they okayed this in here and shrubs and everything else. But that hasn't appeared, nor the drainage they said they were going to do. And now I got weeds standing between there. And the only way I can keep the weeds down is I got to spray them through the fence. They stack all their equipment and materials up to build across the street, the apartment building in here. So still all the lights and the noise and the equipment is right next door to me in here. And so when I ask about what kind of privacy fence is going to go up in here, well, you know, I was here a few weeks ago and I saw it. I think it was in your area, Cindy, here. They put up a privacy fence and they had part of it up about a foot above the ground and raggedy looking fence that's going to fade and trim and that okayed for screening. And y'all said that was okay. But you know, what it does, it empowers them to just take over and move you around and move you out, force you to do something, even these people here. I've seen this area on Cleveland. And so I understand what he's saying. And I'm also talking about the residential, and that's not even commercial versus residential. I'm talking about multi-unit complexes versus residential that we're not enforcing in here. And you talk about inspection to come out and do it. They haven't come out to see what they've okayed and blessed. And they say, well, we just can enforce what you said okay. And the PUD said, hey, you can come 2 feet from this guy's house and put all this in place and maintain it, but you don't tell him when or how. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Barnes. Yes, sir.
Jack Patton, 337 South Rattan, Wichita, Kansas, 67218. Again, looking at the example of the deterioration of a neighborhood by infringement, that I'm sure none of those people who live there in a home thought it was anything other than a residential zoning on there. You know, I'm sure So at some point, some notification may or may not have been issued, which we get back to the STR that they're going to request zoning, but nobody's going to know about it until it's too late. And then even if they know about it, they're not allowed to say anything about it. I go back to, seems like neighborhoods or residential areas are kind of under attack. And I know you said if you have a vibrant neighborhood, people are going to want to come in and be a part of that. Or if your neighborhood is kind of slightly in decline, people are going to want to come in and take advantage of that. And it seems like the homeowner or the resident or the neighborhoods are the one holding the dirty end of the stick, to put it politely. I'm sure as soon as they put all that storage there, even if the city was to come in and buy out, they'd have to pay, or their offer would probably be considerably less than what it was before. Unless the city was going to be generous, or the company across the street that I've worked with before, unless they decide to be generous. So it's the loss of value to them. It's a loss of residential areas for homeowners. And then you get into the point of those people, if you do buy their house, what are they going to replace it with? You know, I have realtors come up to me and say, oh, well, we just sold a house down the street. We'd like to sell your house. Well, you got something that I can move over to that's not going to happen. It's just the constant beating on the door of neighborhoods to subsidize or bail out a commercial interest. And like I said, we're kind of stuck there just, oh, well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patton. Anybody else in the audience like to speak? You can go to the podium, please. State your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
I'm Jane Billman, Billman. I am at 204 North Pinecrest. I hope I'm in the right place. I was told we're desperately trying to find out where the short-term rental rezoning am I in the right place? Nobody knows. It's a big secret.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay. Are you Scott Waddle? Okay. As I say, if you are familiar at all with College Hill, Crown Heights right now, we're thriving. It's thriving. This is where your tax base is. It is not iffy properties. Unless somebody comes in behind the scenes and tears down a couple of houses for a parking lot, then yeah, it gets shaky. But now these short-term rental people who are breaking the law because we're zoned single family are coming in and saying, gee, I can't make a profit unless I do just a few one-nighters and I can't follow the rules. Well, nobody asked you to buy their property. Realtors tell me over and over, this is really good real estate. I want you to drive through. If you are making a decision here, before you do that, drive through and see what has happened to South Crown Heights and College Hill. Beautiful homes, beautiful homes. We are the largest city in Kansas, right? Even considering Kansas City, Kansas. We need to have a beauty spot. A lot of people like to live in the suburbs, and I'm happy for them, but we need a beauty spot. We need green areas. This is where people want to live. Consider the schools there that are still strong. College Hill, Heights, Robinson, East High with the IB program. We have got to keep this area strong. You have got to protect your homeowners. Think of Tulsa, think of Kansas City, how beautiful it is. People want to live there. They want to invest. We need to keep these people in. They'll start streaming out. We call it the murder house. You're familiar with the house on Batten and 2nd Street. That was the person who owned it, misled the neighborhood, broke the law, and sure enough, it was a party house. Now that will happen. Also, these Airbnbs are owned by corporations. We've got to protect these established neighborhoods, Riverside, these areas. This is pro Wichita. I think it's short-sighted to let the short-term rentals in. And yes, sir, you're right. If you will let one corner property go, it empowers people to do their business behind the scenes. We don't know anything. Is my time up?
You have
Yeah.
a few seconds, but if you'd like another minute, we can extend for a minute.
Let's look long-sighted here. Let's have a vision for the neighborhoods of Wichita. Strong neighborhoods make strong cities. And let's don't let a few people who chose to break the law tear down it's erosion from within. Thank you. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you. Scott, you want to try to answer at least a few of the questions there?
Yeah, so type in if you can, so this is the image for the item, which is on Cleveland and the industrial uses. It's type in if you can go ahead and take down the map. This was for a separate item. This wasn't short-term rentals. Yeah.
That's quite all right.
So type in if you can bring up the planning department website. Actually, if you want to sit over there, you can get a closer look. And then, yeah, we're going to go to planning department. If you go up to research up at the top, click on research and then go down to short-term rentals. Go ahead and click on that one if you can. This will take you to the short-term rentals webpage. And if you, okay, so if you scroll down, go ahead and scroll down, type in. Keep going, keep going. It has a listing of the events. So what I can suggest is that you can look at the events, you can see the dates, and then you can look up the videos to watch what occurred during those. In terms of where we are today, it has gone to the Planning Commission, and the next step is for it to go to the City Council. No, not unless they send it back.
Now,
It's like a big, nobody knows, and people aren't.
Well, maybe after the meeting, if you've got ideas about how we can get the word out, I'd be more than happy to get those.
thank you, Scott. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Not seeing anybody else here in the audience that can speak. Is there anybody virtually listening in that would like to speak on either of these issues? Since we've opened up that door, we're talking about Cleveland and what was the cross street on that, Scott? Cleveland and
Oh, it's
Central.
Cleveland and Central, Cleveland and Murdoch.
Anybody online like to speak on this? Hearing none, I'll close that part of the program. Thank you for speaking, ma'am. Appreciate that. Project update, Scotty, you got some ideas on that?
Yeah, I'm sorry we didn't get this put together in time to get it distributed with the packet, but Ty-Ben, if you can go to the folder for today's meeting, you should find a PDF document, and that will have the graphs and charts in terms of caseloads. And so I'm excited to go over those with you and get your thoughts on it. Okay, so Ty-Ben, if you can put that, I don't know if you can do it in full page view. Full screen. Okay, if we scroll down, let's go to the next page. Oh, there we go. Page number 2. I know this is a little bit difficult to read, but if you look at the graph up at the top, this is non-subdivision case items. I think this reflects the workload that you all have been asked to do as part of the MAPC. You can see that our non-subdivision cases have been much higher than our staff capacity in current plans at about 10. And we've seen that that's been relatively high for at least 3 months above that capacity. And I think this reflects those agendas that you've had with 15, 16 cases. So we've been fortunate in that staff have been able to process those, namely current plan staff, largely because the complexity has been It's not been as intense with as many PUDs as we've seen in the past, but still some challenging cases. And I think today's agenda reflects on that nature. Down below, you'll see a graph that indicates the number of non-subdivision cases at MAPC for the year running. We're at 153 cases through mid-June and on pace to easily surpass what occurred in 2022. So if it seems like you've had a lot of cases to review as MAPC members, you have. It's been a very busy year. Next page, please. This is the table for non-subdivision cases. Again, you'll see that we're at 153 for the year. The number that I really keep an eye on closely is our average and median number of cases per MAPC meeting. We're at 11.8 for the average, which again, our staff capacity in current plans is 10, which means that we have got to either people are working longer, we're assigning cases to non-current plan staff for them to cover, all of those things, or we have temporary staff that come in and help us out. And so you've seen Bill Longnecker come in and help out with vacation cases. That has been a huge relief to us. Next slide. This is the similar graph for subdivision cases. We're actually down on subdivision cases, been a little bit lighter in terms of number of cases. You can see that we're at 30 and last year we did 78. So we are on pace to be significantly below what we did last year. However, that as always is only part of the story. Next slide, please, or next page. Up at the top, this is a bar chart and we've only kept it for the last couple of years. What it shows is the number of lots that have been created from those plats, because a plat can be just one lot or a plat can be 200 lots or any amount. Last year, there were 1,900 and looks like 68 lots that were created. And so far this year, we're at 1,352. So we are on pace to eclipse what we did last year by a significant amount. And I think what this does is this reflects the development market and the housing market that we're in today. It is a tight market and there's not a lot of supply out there. And so people are busy getting ready to construct houses to meet that demand. So
Scott, as you talk about that issues, years before that, I'm going back to 3, 4, 5 years, did we have a number of years where we had let down on lot production, new lots coming in into the market?
Yes, we did. And in fact, that's what I'm hearing that that I think is exaggerating kind of the situation that we're in, because after 2008, I think the financial situation and the economic situation kept a lot of folks from moving forward with new construction. And so we lost out on a number of years of new homes. And so not only are we trying to meet today's demand, but we're also trying to, I think, catch up on what we missed out on before. My understanding is that, and you know, Stan Longhofer from WSU is going to be able to provide a lot more perspective on this, but my understanding is that with interest rates as high as they are, and with people having lower interest rates, they're very reluctant to move into a new house because of the cost difference and just the interest rates. So that prevents existing homes from getting onto the market. Well, at the same time, we're lacking the homes that would have been built back in the early 2000s.
Thank you.
So next slide, please. So what we're doing is, this one is always a graph that shows number of cases, types of cases that have come up. The boxes that are highlighted in yellow are the ones where we have exceeded the amount of current plan staff, the capacity of current plan staff to process those in a regular fashion. So just another indicator that we have been going really, really fast and furious to try and work through process cases, and it's taken extra steps. Next slide, please. This is about staffing levels. Administration staff, we're fully staffed, which is fantastic. Current plan staff, we had, in May, we had one vacant position. And so I'm very glad to be able to say that we have filled that position, and that we're anticipating that the associate planner will show up. We've hired a gentleman, his name is Greg. He has subdivision experience. We anticipate that he will show up at the end of this month. So I'm very excited to bring him on board. That transition for him to come in and take on and learn about subdivision process is very important for us, because Neil Strahl is the only staff member in a planning level position that processes those. So to have someone here while Neil is still here is going to be really important. The other thing too is I'll go through the divisions. I'll talk some more about what we're doing in that situation also. In advanced plans, we have 50% vacancy, which is pretty significant because we have 4 positions there. 2 of them are open, and the 2 of them that are open are quite senior. So we're excited to get those filled and working towards that. And then zoning enforcement, we finished out May 100% staffed, which we've been for a number of years, but we've had some changes. So we are currently actively hiring a senior planner for the advanced plans division, the principal planner for the advanced plans division, a senior planner in current plans. And why that's come about is because we are hiring for Erin's position. Erin has resigned. She's taking a job with PEC. And then in addition to that, there's another one that should be listed on here. We are advanced filling Neil's position. So we're hoping to get another person. So we'll have 2 people who can learn from Neil before he retires in January. We are also advertising for the intern position. We've had a combination inspector who has accepted a position with MABCD. So she's resigned from the planning department and is moving over there, which is nice because she's across the hall. So we can go and ask Michelle questions, but it's a challenge in that we need to fill her position. So we are hiring 6 positions right now in a department of 20 people. So, so we're working on getting that, getting caught up on that. So next slide. Okay, and next slide, please. I did not get an opportunity to update all of these. So that is something I'm going to finish up, and then we'll email these out to you and post them. But in terms of short-term rentals, as we discussed earlier, it's been through the MAPC. It is going to the city council. So that is the next step. So we are just buttoning up some of the drafts and then also checking in with elected officials, see if there are any questions before we bring that forward. Next slide. This one's for the solar energy conversion systems. We are checking in with folks on the city council to see if they would like a briefing or have any questions. This was presented to District Advisory Board 5 earlier this week. And I believe the outcome on that is that they recommended adoption of this. So we will check back in with the county commission and see how they would like to proceed with this one. This is the updates to the zoning code to differentiate a small and large solar energy conversion systems. Next slide. Nightclub in the city. This one we have not made any progress on. It just has not been a front burner issue lately, but hope to get this one wrapped up by the end of the year. Next slide. Daycare, that was adopted by both the county commission and the city of Wichita. A letter went out to home occupation daycare providers to make them aware of the changes so that they can now have 12 children and 2 staff members there instead of 10 and 1. Next slide. So I'm interested to see the impact that that has on the daycare slots and provision of childcare. Next slide. Okay, the rest is places for people. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. I guess One thing on this is that incentives are mentioned. It's my understanding that the city council will receive a briefing on incentives. It's scheduled for the workshop at the end of July. Tentatively, it's scheduled for that. So we will see where that ends up, but maybe that'll touch on places for people and implementation. So we'll see. So with that, I'll stop. Are there any questions?
Any questions of Scott, Cindy, or Joe? Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. We've already had public comment. I don't know if we've got anything else. You guys that are here have something else that you wanted to talk about that we missed or? Yes. Okay, you have 3 minutes. Again, state your name and address for the record.
I'll say one more time. Lonnie Barnes, 2924 North Terrace Drive here in Wichita, Kansas. You know, this was a very interesting meeting in here, and guys, and I can't say enough here. So when I start, I see what the thing with the Cleveland and what they're doing and how that even overflows into other stuff. I listened to project updates in here, and part of the thing in here, my project updates and acquisition of property and lots and stuff of this nature. I'm seeing this happening a lot in my Northeast community, and I try and bring everyone's attention to it. When I drive down 21st, 13th, 17th, 9th Street, I say, count the number of empty lots that's usually from Hillside clean down to the bypass in here. I said, and blocks of them in here, taking up property. And this is prime property in here. City's finally coming in and starting to do the infrastructure corrections that they're going from Hillside down to the bypass. They jumped over that section of the city and went from the other side of the bypass down to Broadway, putting an industrial area, putting in new sewer lines, lighting, electrical, everything else. So now they're finally circling back around to connect all those together now because they got all these empty lots. And so that, you know, I understand that the city wants to encourage people to come in and build up these areas because they're depressed economically, income wise and everything else. But you've taken the prime property of the community here and turning it over to developers in here. When I talk about the area from Hillside, from 17th Street over to 21st Street going down Hillside, my mother, we had a house right there on the corner of Hillside and Stadium Drive where you get that little swerve that comes out. 22 years ago, the city came in and took those properties and cleaned up everything along Hillside that faced Hillside, put mounds and trees and lots and a big fence at the back of it. Now we're advertising it as University Village and prime property for developers to come in to build whatever they need to face Wichita State. But you've pushed the neighborhood and the community further and further back. When I talk about this area of Wichita State, from Hillside to Oliver over there, from 17th over to 16th in here, I'm probably one of the few private homeowners that still owns property in that University Village area in here. And definitely one of the probably the last or two or three that minorities that own property in here. And so all this development is supposed to be inclusive of and improving the neighborhoods, but you have pushed most of the neighborhoods that surround those universities in here further away. You put diverters in the street and walls and streets to push them further away. And when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not working for everyone. And we're definitely not including the minorities in this portion of it or the communities in this thing in here. I think it's a big oversight and a big disadvantage that we're doing to our city and our communities in here. And I say we let big commercial industry just take it.
You want another minute?
No, I'm probably good on this because I just get frustrated in here because it seems like everything leans, he says, to big industry and developers in here. You know, when I come back to this in here, it's even hard for me to rally support even from my community and saying, guys, you know, I'm probably one of the few places and a few other people in here that even within this residence who owns this property. Once I give up mine, we're out of this in here. If we wanted to come and develop anything, we could not do it because we're not.
Any questions for you, Lonnie?
Okay.
Any questions for Lonnie?
Nope.
No, just a comment. So I have equal concerns, Lonnie, especially in 67214. As I drive around in that zip code and I see the number of houses that have been scraped. And I worry about the lack of affordable, accessible housing in that area. And I know duplexes that's not going to cure the problem. That's not going to get people in the 67214 to own housing. And I'm constantly trying to look at what is the solution for getting affordable single family homes back on some of those lots in the 67214 zip code. I've seen a map of the lots that are vacant in that zip code. And I see the same issues happening in City Council District 3, which I happen to live in. Not only the encroachment of industrial into neighborhoods, and of course I'm seeing that on 55th Street between Hydraulic and Broadway. It's just continuing to grow right in the middle of all of these residences. We now have all this industrial use that continues to grow. And so I just want you to know that I'm equally as concerned. I'm trying to listen and think of what are some of the solutions for some of these issues.
Because I think we got a ton of things we can do for this area in here. We talk about, and I come back to this diversity, equity, and inclusion in here. Most of that area you're talking about, there are food deserts, there's business deserts, there's everything else. You know, that community needs all the features that everyone else around the city needs. They need grocery stores, they need businesses and jobs. They need all the other things and conveniences that come along with it. But you're pushing them out of that portion. You're not pushing the incentives to come in there. You know, and the city could put up incentives, like we do all around the county in here, of how do we develop this area? We talk about solar energy. Definitely you got enough empty lots to put up enough solar panels. You can sell something back to the city.
I mean, I'm gonna need to cut off, just to be fair, we have rules that says
Okay.
everybody gets a chance, and if we ramble, then we could be here for days, so.
All right,
For your comments, I appreciate that.
I'll see you next week.
There you go. That'll work. So. Okay, that takes us through, anybody online want to have an issue they want to speak about? Hearing none, we'll close the public comments area. I have no new business. Scott, is there anything else we got? Mary, anything else we got? Okay. Our next meeting will be July 13th at 10 a.m. And with that, we stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming.